Welcome to another one of my World War II heritage walks. Today I'm back at RAF Beaulieu. Hopefully you've seen the first walk I did where I went around the perimeter. But after that I realised there was so much more I could have shown you. So today we're going to do another walk which takes in some lesser known sites that not many people know about, and I hope you learn something new today as well. To get started on this walk, you park up at Roundhill Enclosure, you park in the first car park and take a little bit of a walk down, and we're going to be going through this gate here. The first place we're going to visit, it's quite eerie, but I'll show you, you can see what you think too. The defence site that we're sat on now is just next to the main road that goes towards Brockenhurst, over the road from the airfield. And as you can see, all these concrete foundational bases. There's around 13 of these, I think, and they would have housed those Nissen Huts, those huts with the kind of the corrugated curved roofs. I'd estimate there could have been maybe 200 to 300 airmen stationed here during the war. And as I said, it's quite an eerie sight. You never really see anyone else out here. To continue on the walk, you can either go back where I came through those woods and go back through the gate, or you can just shimmy under the fence over here and get out onto the road. I'm going to leave it up to your imagination to what I do. Now walking down towards Roundhill campsite. So if you can see that, it says Slow Pigs. Now if you're not from the New Forest, you might think that the people who live there are trying to insult you, but they're not. That's all to do with something called pannage. It's a tradition that dates back from 1079 when William the Conqueror founded the New Forest. What pannage is when the commoners release their pigs onto the forest to eat all the acorns, because acorns are toxic, potentially poisonous to horses. But not just horses. If you're a dog walker like me, acorns can also be poisonous to your dog. Those pigs are certainly helping us all out, or at least those who love the forest and like to take their dog out here. Now walking into Roundhill campsite, and whenever I come this way I always feel like I'm walking in history's footsteps. If you look around, there's the water tower there, and also these old foundations here. They would have been part of the Communal site out here, because during the war there were around 2,000 airmen and women here, and in this part of Roundhill we're at now, there was a barber's, a gym's, possibly the cinema, a groceries, stores, in the main accommodation up this pathway. It would have been a hive of activity, maybe different nationalities and languages. The US Air Force and obviously the RAF, but also the Czech Air Force were based here at points during wartime as well. But just a little bit about the water tower there. We saw this on the last walk around of RAF Beaulieu, and at the time I think I might mention how well kept it looks, because it is actually, I think, one of the only existing structures still at RAF Beaulieu standing that's not on private land. And the reason it looks so shiny is because it's still in use. I think the last company to own it was the Balmer Lawn Hotel. Don't know if they still do, but around, I think 10 or 15 years ago, the tank up at the top there was actually replaced for the cool sum of £250,000. But the actual steel structures there, they'll be the original ones. So yeah, interesting fact, or maybe not, who knows. But anyway, we're going to carry on the walk next, and then we're going to follow the path, and we're going to end up seeing some structures with a bit of a different history to them. Now if you fancy a quick detour, you could go down that track there for about 10 minutes, and on the right you'll eventually see some old air raid shelters. And I'm not going to do that today because I showed you that in my original RAF Beaulieu Walk. Those air raid shelters down that way down there, they're on the old Women's Auxiliary Air Force site. But we're just going to carry on walking down here for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to see something else that I think is pretty cool. We're now turning off left down this road. Now it does say access to cottages only and no camping beyond that point, but that doesn't mean we can't walk down here. This part of the walk can be a little bit confusing, but don't let it put you off, because you've got every right to walk this way. You'll notice this public bridleway sign here. All you do, just pop the gate open and we're allowed to walk down here. We're coming up to another one of the sort of communal areas or accommodation areas, I think. I'll explain what was here in a minute. But if you look around, you start to see signs of very old buildings. I don't know if you can see those past those horses. That looks like an old Handcraft Hut. There's also an old building just behind the horses here as well. Not sure if you can make that out, but where it gets really interesting, we can get a really close look up ahead. And as I said, don't worry, because there is another bridleway sign here, so we're not doing anything illegal. But here you go, here's the sign. What I've just panned past there are called Handcraft Huts. They are made by the Universal Asbestos Company in 1942 to help the war effort. They were found on airfields all over the UK. I don't know why they were called Handcraft Huts. I suspect it was because they were quite easy to build, just with a team of men. They've got 7 sides to them. I'll overlay a photo so you can see a little bit better. They are made from asbestos, but it appears a farmer who owns this land is using them possibly for storage or for livestock. But yeah, it's interesting that they still survive, and I think the reason is, like I said in previous videos, it's because they are actually on private land, so they never had the reason to actually knock them down. I'm now carrying on the walk down the path, or this road, down to what would have been called Communal Site 2 during the war. I always think of this as probably the posh part of the airfield because it was where the officers would have been stationed. It had an officer's mess, dining rooms, accommodation, gym, a grocery store, and it even had a squash court. During wartime, lots of property was requisitioned by the military as part of the war effort, and these buildings here would have been no different. No doubt, as a general rule of thumb, if you're ever driving through the forest or you drive past a large property, just think it probably did have some kind of historical point during the war where it was used. So for example, you have Exbury, and you have Breamore House, used by General Patton of the US Army, and then the Balmer Lawn Hotel, that was used by Montgomery and Eisenhower to help them plan D-Day. I'm now going to turn right and walk up through Prairie Wood Enclosure. Now at the moment the Forestry Commission are doing some tree felling, so I'm hoping that we can get access, because it's a lovely walk. You can walk through this enclosure, you don't really tend to see anyone apart from a guy with a chainsaw today, and it's also the site of what would have been, can you hear the chainsaws? It's the site of what would have been the sewage dispersal unit, so we'll go see if we can find any evidence of that. Prairie Wood Enclosure is normally quite a relaxing place to come on this walk, but what with the tree fellas and the chainsaws today, not so much. But this was the site of the sewage, or one of the sewage dispersal units or sewage treatment areas for the entire airfield. And as you walk around the enclosure, there goes that chainsaw, you do start to see evidence. Now I've just found some old drainage cover here, so there's things like this all over the place. Now it makes sense for this to be the sewage area because it does all flow downhill to the Lymington River down there. What I've also found as well are all these old bricks. Now, what's really interesting, well, to me at least, when you find bricks out on Beaulieu Airfield is what the history of them could have been. Southampton was bombed horrifically during World War II. Something like 2,000 bombs dropped on it during the Southampton Blitz. To make a lot of the pathways we've walked on today, like those concrete tracks, the military brought bricks from the bombed houses to Beaulieu Airfield and used those to make the paths. So when you're walking down those concrete tracks next time at RAF Beaulieu, or if you see a brick somewhere in the woods like I've been doing today, it could be you're either walking on the bricks of an old bombed ruin, or you're just finding bricks like I am now, which could have been part of Southampton Blitz. I've actually just noticed something I've never noticed before. See where this old tree has come up? We must be stood on part of the old structure out here in Prairie, because look, it's pulled concrete up with it, and it's pulled all the brickwork up as well. You can see it all embedded into this old tree. What I'm going to do now is walk up out of Prairie Wood Enclosure and get back towards Roundhill campsite, away from these guys with chainsaws. Maybe come back another day. It always seems every time I come out to RAF Beaulieu, I end up finding something new. Square structure, brick corners. There were two types of buildings at RAF Beaulieu during the war. You had temporary wooden buildings and temporary brick buildings. And the reason you tend to just see the foundations is because they build the brick foundations for any temporary building and then put that kind of Nissen Hut type stuff over the top, corrugated iron or wood. I'm now coming up to the main entrance of the Roundhill campsite. In the summer, this place is absolutely teeming with campers, but at the moment it's really nice and quiet. In particular interest to me is the sick quarters. Would have been through those woods and up towards the top of the hill there. There would have been an ambulance garage and a mortuary, which could have been where some of the airmen who died here, because there were a number of crashes which I discussed in my first video, that could have been where they would have been taken. On a more happier note, we're now at Round Pond. Maybe some of those airmen would occasionally have a little bit of break, be able to sit here, and the air women, of course. Just walking now up back towards where the water tower was at the beginning of our Roundhill campsite section. We're walking on these concrete paths at the moment, which are relics of when this was an airfield. And actually, everywhere you look on Roundhill, you see evidence. I mean, if we just look here over to my left, you can see foundations of some old buildings, because this would have been that communal part I told you about earlier when we were at the water tower. So you can see evidence of the old buildings there. Then obviously with these concrete roads underneath these could be the bricks that were brought here from the Southampton Blitz in order to build the airfield up for all those 2,000 plus airmen and women. Just one final thing to show you whilst we're in Roundhill. Now if you see that fencing up ahead, that fencing has been put there as a ring around what at the moment just looks like a mound of bracken. But what it actually is, it's pudding barrow. Barrows are Bronze Age burial grounds. They date from between 2000 and 1000 BC, before the Romans even invaded Britain. They're protected by law. They actually ended up flattening 10 of these Bronze Age barrows, with exception to this one. Now they were kind enough to let archaeologists excavate the barrows that they were going to flatten for the airfield. They did have a little bit of time, the archaeologists, but this is one that didn't have to be flattened because it's not actually near any of the airstrips. Now walking back out of Roundhill, back up to that road I crossed earlier where there was a sign about the pigs. Hope you've enjoyed the walk. I've got about 10 minutes left. We're going to be walking past Stockley Enclosure where we saw those foundations earlier before we get back to the car park. There will be one more thing that I want to show you just before I get back in the car. If you've enjoyed this walk, do subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I try to release a video like this every week about local World War II heritage or just walks you can do out in the New Forest. Got any comments? You might want to correct some of the things I've said. I'm no archaeologist or historian, I just love this place, and I hope you've enjoyed coming with me on this walk. If you just want to add a tiny little extra onto your walk, just come over down here, cross the road as if you walk into the airfield perimeter, because we're now at the site of Cult or Cold Pixie's Cave. It goes by both names. This here is another one of those Bronze Age barrows, but you'll probably notice it's not as uniform a shape as the one we saw down at Roundhill, and I think the reason being, when the airfield was built, it was actually excavated by the archaeologists first, so they could see if they can find anything. What they did find was an old Bronze Age necklace. So they found something at least, but that probably accounts for why it looks so undulating and non-uniform. It doesn't look like your classic barrow. The reason it's called Cold Pixies, the country folk from hundreds of years ago used to think that pixies roamed the New Forest, causing all sorts of mischief for them and their livestock. But that's it. Hope you've enjoyed yourself. I've really enjoyed it. Hasn't rained again, which has been great. I'm going to get home now and put my feet up. I'll see you next time with another video.